Global Gladiators, welcome back, and we are going to be looking at the compromised stage again today. I say again because I had done a previous video on all of the stages from the core box of the original Kickstarter back in 2017, I think it was. It's been a little while, it's been a few years, there's been some changes, there's been a whole new Aftershock set, and a lot more questions to go along with it. In the first video, I tried not to create too many spoilers. This video, I'm just going to answer as many questions as I can with strategies. So the whole thing is basically going to be spoilers. If you have any problems with that, you can watch the first video. It'll give you a general idea of what needs to be done. And this is more for the people that have questions and a lot of difficulty setting things up and not sure how certain cards react, how things are supposed to go. It's going to be a much longer form video, but the whole point, as I said, is to give the best explanation possible to how it works. This is for the compromised stage. It does not matter how you set up your enemy deck or your fighters. Basically, we're just going to focus on the stages themselves. How you choose the enemies, how you choose the fighters will affect the difficulty of the stage, and that's just part of the fun and the magic of having a modular system, because things will go up, things go down. You can check the compendium or ask other people's advice on Board Game Geek and other places, such as the Facebook group, where people are very, very active. And you can get opinions on ways certain cards work, or if there's anything I don't cover. If you have any questions or you think I got something wrong in the rules, be sure to put the page number of the rule book where you think I got it wrong so that someone else can look it up. The comments live forever, but I'm not remaking the video unless I do it a third time, which is very, very unlikely, but the comments will be there. And if what you have to say really is helpful, then people can go and reference that part of the rule book themselves. Them looking at the rule book, maybe they'll find something else that they were unsure about at the same time. It's a complicated document, and just the way the brain works, you're not able to pick it all up at the first time around, and there's lots of things to forget if it's been sitting on the shelf while you play other games and do other things and live your life. So be kind, throw the explanation with the rulebook reference in there if you can. So let's take a closer look at the map and see what we're dealing with. As you can see, every single tile will have some objective locations. It'll have enemy entering markers. It'll have places for your players to start at. And in this case, it has the little medic house looking spaces there in the center. I think the first time I created the episode, I said that there must be some type of like party sub in the middle, and that's what everybody was trying to get to. The storytelling of the stage is not just told in the artwork of the tile, but it's told in how the cards are written and how they react and how they respond. Basically, you are in an office with regular office people that are not fighters, and for some reason, if they can make it to the center of the map, they are going to feel safe and they're no longer going to be scared. I don't know necessarily how a conference table does that, but that's what you're trying to do. You can use the rules instead of the artwork to imagine what is going on with the stage. That being the case, we have certain things that we have to do every single time. Doesn't change no matter what. First things up, we're going to place the crate tokens, the loot tokens. This may change when Tides of the Dragon comes out, because there's a few things that can be modified as far as terrain. But right now, if you just have the basic Rise of the Kingdom box, if you have any of the other tiles, even if you have stretch goals, you're still going to put the crates exactly where they go. Next up, you need to select the villain that you want to play against. The stage conditions, if you're playing through a story card, may tell you what this is going to be. That part's up to you. Maybe you selected it randomly. There are a lot of interesting villain enemy decks for you to play against. This one I'm going to choose from the regular core box. As I say, I'm just going to keep everything core box related, but it won't change if you have any of the extra content or any of the stretch goals. I'm going to pick all along because the golden dragons are in the box, like I said, and everybody should have that. And then I would recommend looking at the stage and the enemy and then deciding which fighter combination you want to use in order to beat the game. However, that's just not how most people play. They say, I like this one, I like that one, let's play this. So I'm going to say, let's bring out Brandon, the most, I know he's based on Brandon Lee, but, you know, the Bruce Lee looking guy. That seems like something people would pick. It's like, oh, okay, you're playing with your wife. Maybe Yinghua, bring her in because she looks pretty cool and she's a police officer, and maybe I want to have that as part of this office building thing that seems to go together. Maybe they're attacking the precinct and she's already there. That sounds like a cool bit of storytelling. All right, now I got Brandon and Yinghua. They're super cool. I like them. Let's bring them to the party. And then just continuing the way setup works, I am making this video for people that are not familiar with how the stages and everything go. So it might be a good idea to bring in some allies. You can select them based on their abilities, or you can just randomly select them, or do the same thing we do with fighters. Pick some people that look cool. So I'm going to select these two individuals, and it is going to be Drago and Anastasia. So they will be helping us out, and that part is pretty cool. All right, so we have the enemies set up, we've got the tokens set up, and we pulled out all our figures, all that kind of business. Our allies are sitting in our play area as they should, and we're ready to go, right? No, we don't know what to do with the objectives. And how do we know what to do with the objectives? Do they show up active? Do they show up inactive? There's really only one way to check. There's no hard and fast rule. The hard and fast rule is read the stage card. So this is a card that has been changed from the first version Kickstarter to all subsequent versions. So if you notice that there's a little bit of different language, you might have a first edition, and there's an errata pack, and everything's available for download and print for yourself on the website if you need any of that. But we're just gonna not worry about that because there's a very high chance you have the one that's already been fixed. And let's start reading the cards. Start with the front. Stage setup is gonna tell us that we have a few things we need to do. First up is we're gonna go look for scared staff, and that is gonna be the nature of the objectives in the game. And we're setting those into the stage area, and you're also going to have a condition, which is the armed intruders. So set those all up in here, and that'll help you get started. We will take a look at what each of those do in just a second. Let's also flip over this card and see what's on the other side, as there can be other conditions to go as well. Notice this is the definition of the safe room icons at the bottom. Instead of just little house with the plus sign or whatever you called it, the medic tent, then it actually tells you what it's supposed to be. So that's why they're running into the conference room, because the safe room entrance must be underneath it. That makes sense. Now we got some storytelling. Now we understand why we're doing this stuff. Also, we have stage rules, and it tells you explicitly that the objective tokens are the scared staff. They're treated as figures, so if there's anything that damages a figure, then they can have that happen as well. They are not treated as fighters, so if anything is specific to fighters, then don't treat them that way. And if they are defeated, then you're going to be removing the card from the game, which means it does not get reshuffled, and you place its token on armed intruders, and that sets the values for armed intruders. If they're successful, then you lose, right? So those are your conditions for win or lose. Then what are you going to do with the other stuff that goes on? All right, safe room space. If there is ever a scared staff without fear that's on a safe room, then they can go into the safe room being rescued. You discard the token and you shuffle its card back into the deck. So they can pop in multiple times, but you also are rewarded with a loot card for everybody. So that's pretty awesome, right? You can get some extra strength and other cool things with the loot stuff. And that's going to tell you that your main objective, the main thing that you want to think about while playing this, is getting those scared staff into that safe room space. So that part is fun and explained. Notice, big difference, if you save one of the objectives, then it gets shuffled back. If the enemy gets rid of an objective, then it does not. So each power on Scared Staff is treated as fear, and the fear cannot exceed its health value. So if it loses health, then there's a higher chance that it will have too much fear on it, and that is a problem for you. Also, interact. Interacts can be done anywhere on the board, but this has specific requirements that if there is an inactive objective next to you, then you can perform the interact, and that's going to be pretty cool because you gain a bunch of defense tokens for each of the power that has been put on it. So keep in mind that power was treated as fear, and that fear, as it builds up once you stand next to them, you're going to be able to take it as defense for yourself, which is very, very helpful. Okay, so we are going to place this stage rules this side up into our stage area, and then we're going to take a look at armed intruders next. These are the bad guys. In our case, the golden dragons. They are breaking into this office and they're trying to kill some people, and you want to stop that. So after they've been defeated, you place the token on the card, which is going to remain in play on the left side because it's a stage condition. And if you lose 2, that's for any count of players, if you lose 2 of these office people, then you absolutely lose. Now, every turn you're going to have this activate, and this occurs on the stage turn. Every enemy moves 3 spaces towards the nearest objective. You place a power on each objective that has at least 1 enemy engaged, so that means next to it. And then you defeat any enemy that has 5 or more power and is engaged with at least 1 enemy. So what is going to happen? Keep in mind, 1 power per turn, basically. It doesn't matter how many enemies there are engaged with it, it's going to gain a power. You can flip the stuff back and forth using the interacts and use that power to gain defense tokens for yourself, and that helps keep the count down, but it also means you're sacrificing your action in order to use that interact. So strategize using that information. You want characters that can utilize a lot of cards, because then their action doesn't mean as much. Unfortunately for Brandon, having a lot of cards in his hand might power him up the most, in which case you don't want to use any cards. But fortunately, you also have Yinghua, who might be able to draw more cards more quickly and be able to not have so much happen with just her action. So think about that as you pick and choose which fighters you want to use. Maybe you don't want to use the ones I've selected here because I thought they looked cool. Maybe you want to use something a little more strategic. That's part that is up to you. But notice you basically have 4 turns-ish every time that you see a objective token come out. And if you did manage to hit it right there on the 4th turn, that you'll get all those defense tokens to go along with it, and that helps you out. But also keep in mind, it is entirely possible that other cards could be placing extra power onto those objective tokens, and that will accelerate your problems. Keeping in mind, you can only have 1 of those objective tokens be defeated before you're screwed. You will lose the game on the second one. So just keep those strategies in mind. Keep those things going as you play through the game. You must be flipping those objectives over as much as you can, and think about using characters that are more card action heavy and less regular action heavy. So let's move that to the side. We're going to take a quick look at the actual objective cards themselves. It says if the objective is inactive, you place a power on it. So that means if it is set to inactive, it is going to gain fear. Keeping in mind, you're placing power during the inactive state. The enemies are going to be moving 3 spaces towards the objectives every stage turn. So they're going to do their own movement, they're going to attack you, all that kind of fun stuff. And then the stage is going to take their turn and they're going to move towards the objectives. The only way to flip them over to active so that they don't gain power is to use the interact. And you have to be next to the scared staff. So if you are guiding them, then you can move them around. That's basically the storytelling of the mission. You're taking them by the hand, and if they're afraid, you taking away their fear when you flip them from inactive to active gives you a boost of confidence, and you get some defense tokens to go along with it. Okay. That being the case, you need to set yourself up so that your cards will be taking out the minions or whoever gets next to them in order to make that work. That's basically the strategy. All right. Otherwise, if they're on their regular active side, it is going to move away from the enemy, and if the enemies are equidistant, then you are going to be able to move them towards the safe space. So your goal is to kite them in such a way that when the enemies are finished with their stage turn activation, they're equidistant from each other and the objective. I know this can be a pain in the butt. There's a couple other things that you might also be able to do, such as start with the enemies on one side of the board, get yourself all buffed up, and move one character to the other side of the board so that the enemies will start populating in a different corner, which will push the scared staff back the other way. And if they're pushed towards the center in that way, then they can end up in the middle of the room, and that's where the safe room is. It can be confusing, I know. So we're going to take a look at a couple more of the cards that go along with it. We're going to focus in a little bit more on what that strategy is and how that would work, and hopefully that will help you understand how the scared staff moves. You have to keep in mind of where the enemies are, if they're active or inactive, and the boss counts as an enemy. So you might think, oh, I just got rid of the minions, it's gonna be great. No, the boss is still on the stage, so you have to have at least one extra minion if you're gonna try to make them equidistant and push them forward in that kind of triangle maneuver. Yeah, that's why it's so confusing for a lot of people. And the most interesting, the most beneficial card to you is this card, Calming Words. And the reason why it's so important is it allows you to choose movement of the scared staff. It is an event. There are several in the deck, so they do pop up fairly often. I think there's 4. There might be 3 in the deck, but the main thing here is whoever has the least amount of defense tokens. This makes it a little bit more difficult for you since you can't swap tokens around, but it goes into their play area, and you will be able to use up to 4 defense tokens to move a scared staff up to 4 spots away. It has to be active though, so we're talking you got to coordinate. Somebody else is going to or it could be you, it's a feint, so it doesn't really matter, but somebody is going to be giving up their action in order to interact and flip the token over to its active side. If it had power in its inactive state, you will be able to gain that as defense tokens. So what you might do, you have a really scared person and you run over to them and you're like, I am a hero, I am here to save the day, do not be afraid, and whatever voice you want to use, that'll be Yinghua. You decide whose voice that's going to be. And they are like, oh my god, you're the best, you're amazing. Okay, great. Now take all these defense tokens. I feel good now, I feel safe. This is the storytelling of what's going on here. And now you say, how about you run towards the center of the room? And they do that. They run 4 spaces towards the center of the room because you took 4 power from them. If they had that much on them, they were close to their max, they were close to being defeated, and then you used up all of those defense tokens that you got from them as part of power, and they ran towards the center of the room. If you were in a situation where you're not necessarily going to be able to have them end their turn in a way that sets up an interesting triangle where they would run away and be in the right place, have them overshoot the goal of where you sent them, so that when they run back away from the bad guys, they will run back into and end their movement in one of the safe spaces, because that'll make your life a lot easier. Different types of strategies for different types of things, but basically this is going to make your life absolutely the easiest by utilizing this card, and the best time to use it is when they are at their most afraid, and you can feint to move them around. So now that we've talked a little bit about cards that can help you set up a strategy in order to be successful here, let's look at the cards that will completely ruin those ideas. First up, bribes and threats. This is going to move each token with at least 1 fear 3 spaces towards the boss. So that completely negates all of your calming words that you just utilized, because now they're moving where you wanted them to move away from, and the boss is going to gain random defense tokens if they are engaged. So not only are you going to give up some power that you don't want to add anymore to the scared staff, you're also going to be giving random defense tokens. Yeah, it's a terrible one to pull. It does not feel good. And another fun one is the hacked security system. This puts an extra power on scared staff. If it was active, now it's going to be flicked inactive, so you're going to have to waste your turn again with the interact in order to get it back to the active side. And not only that, the enemies are going to move towards the safe space area, which is going to make it much more difficult for you to get the scared staff in that space. So it ruins your strategy in a lot of different ways. They've got some type of hacker messing with the lights, the I don't know, the different systems. Maybe there's a halon system, maybe there's sprinklers. Nobody wants to get wet. Whatever the case is, they're hacking that security system, and they're making it easier for the enemy to know where the safe room is and prevent anyone from getting next to it. And then you have the problem of the scared staff are people, and sometimes instead of just flight, they pick fight and decide to jump into the battle. They're going to move 2 spaces towards the nearest enemy and attack. So maybe this is helpful, but probably not. You really probably wanted to get them to move closer to the safe space, and now they're running towards the enemies, which means that they're going to very unlikely defeat them and more likely gain a bunch of fear that you didn't want them to have. And speaking of extra fear, Rising Fear just happens to throw more power onto the scared staff, and if it doesn't, or if it's not able to put enough, in this case 2 power, and which means that you would have had to have had at least 2 inactive objectives present, then it's going to flip one of them over to its inactive side, and that basically is going to require you to use an interact action, and you know, in an action economy, that's no good, so it delays you basically for another turn. Now we've taken a look at all the cards for the stage, and they're going to be adding power, they're going to be messing with movement, and you can see how you do not want power to be on any of the objectives. You're going to be doing everything you can to stay next to them so that you can use the interact and manage that power. And we'll figure out where to go from there. Let's see. The main things that we need to look at, I think it's best if we just assume you're going to be using simultaneous mode, because simultaneous mode basically allows you to act, or allows me to demonstrate at least, as if you were also doing it in solo mode, since all of the actions of the enemies happen at one time, the same way that they would happen if solo mode were occurring. So we're going to plop in 2 enemies for the threat phase. So we've got some enemies pop in, we've got a Jin, we've got a Dao, and we need to make some decisions. Do we want to stay next to our objectives, or do we want to start taking out the enemy? Here's the thing, when you're just starting off, the main thing that you've got is nothing. You don't have any cards, you don't have any real buffs, you don't have any loot that you can use in any kind of way. So the best thing you could possibly do is power up as quickly as possible. You might have a couple of rounds that will allow you to add some power to each of the objectives. I think that might be your best foot forward. However, if you do take that tactic, you're also going to be adding minions every round. So compromise. I think the best thing to do here is for Brandon, in the situation up top, to run over and grab the loot and start trying to hit Jin, and for Yinghua to run up and start hitting Dao. If they're able to maximize the effectiveness of their allies, then hopefully they'll be able to defeat the minions located in these areas, and that will keep the minion entry space clear. If they start packing in or losing the ability to control where the minions are going to populate from, then things get a lot harder. As you can see, the corner with the yellow token is pretty far away from any of the enemies. If I were to say, take a move that moves you away from the most enemies, you are either going to move towards the yellow corner or you're going to move towards the red corner at this point, just because Dao is closer to the blue token than all along is to where the red token space would be. So in this way, you're going to start creating triangles, right? The planes that are created, the sides that are created. You want to focus maybe on one objective at a time, how it moves and where it's positioned. If I can keep that yellow token safe and exactly where it's at for a little while, then I will be in a position where the minions that pop in won't really affect him. The only thing that's going to cause him to move is special stage conditions, and keeping in mind, he can't move through me because only the boss can move through other figures. So that part will be helpful in keeping him safe. If I had Clint or somebody else that had ranged attacks for a lot of stuff, then it would be ideal just to keep him pinned in there and safe, and try to manage where the blue token moves back and forth. So let's accelerate and see what will happen if I go ahead and follow the strategy of pushing Yinghua towards Dao and having Jin run up and grab the loot token. Sorry, not Jin. Having Brandon run up and grab the loot token next to Jin, and see how that will affect the rest of this particular turn. So these guys are all going to move, and then we need to take a look at what each one of these enemies does, since they have their own movement rules that are associated with them outside of just the stage, and I want you guys to have a pretty good example of what is going on. So let's bring up the red Dao and the green Jin and see what type of motion they're going to do when they activate their threat phase. And Dao is not going to advance because he's engaged, but he will be able to retreat 2 spaces. So very unlikely, as I say, that Yinghua is going to be able to defeat, even with Anastasia's help for Dao. So Dao is going to retreat away from, in a furthest direction possible from the fighter. So he's going to move back in a straight line. And then Jin is going to attack the fighter engaged, which is Brandon, and then is not going to move. So that's pretty much just going to leave him exactly where he's placed. So we can let these guys go away. And then we'll finish off all the player stuff. We'll just assume whatever happened and start focusing on the cards resolution in the stage play area. First up, we are going to look at our stage condition card, which does not have anything that we need to take care of right now because it has an interact instead of an activate. So I'm not going to worry about it. But what does have an activate is the Armored Intruders. So let's look and see the specifics of that card one more time. Read it very carefully. It says each enemy moves 3 spaces towards the nearest objective. For Dao, when he popped in originally, it was the blue one. Now the blue is more spaces away than the yellow, so he's going to move towards the yellow. The Jin, his only option is to move towards the yellow. And the boss counts as an enemy, so it will move too. So let's move all these folks. So now we have to look at the next sentence, and we're going to be placing 1 power on each objective that has at least 1 enemy engaged with it. Right now, that is only the yellow token. So it does not care if it is active or inactive. That's it. If it had 5 at this point, then it would be defeated. And keep in mind that it says after a scared staff is defeated, that also means health related, and those scared staff count as figures, but not enemies or fighters. Figures end up taking damage in different ways. Don't throw a Molotov cocktail at it. Then the next one in card order is the blue scared staff, and it is currently inactive, which means we will place 1 power on it. And then we can't do anything else with it. It will stay in its current position as it is still inactive. Then we're going to switch over to the yellow one, since that is next in the order, and it is inactive, so it will receive a power. If you're keeping track, this means it currently has 2 power on it. If this were to occur the exact same way, it only has 1 more round left, and it will be defeated. And that will be a problem for us. Then we'll pull a stage card, and for the sake of demonstration, let's just say it's a Calming Words, and we'll put it in Yinghua's area. The second turn, we'll start with a brand new threat phase, and we'll pull a couple more figures here. So we add in a couple more minions. We've got a blue Wanbo and a yellow Jin. What would a likely situation be here? Let's say Drago is able to defeat the Dao, and Yinghua is going to continue to buff up and attack Jin, and that leaves the blue token kind of on its own for a little bit, but the yellow token is still in that corner. So if Drago is able to defeat Dao, that makes it so that there's just enough time and room for Brandon to do a sprint action and end up in that space, cornering and blocking and keeping anyone from getting adjacent or engaged with the yellow token. So let's try that out. Then we have to do the moves for the other minions. This is going to move the green Jin and Wanbo. Then we need to start activating our armed intruders again. And this is going to require all of the enemies moving. So right now the only ones that can move are Wanbo and the boss. And Wanbo hits harder than the boss in a lot of circumstances. So this is a really, really bad effect with him, since normally he moves so slowly it gives you some time to build up or maybe hit him from a distance using different tactics. But no, now he's going to triple his move speed towards you and use that giant reach also to mess you up pretty bad. So keep that in mind when playing this stage. Should also note that it says move and not advance. So because he's not blocked, the yellow Djinn will move as well and do everything he can to get close to the objective token. Where does that put us? It means that the yellow token is no longer engaged, but the blue one is. The yellow token had 2 and continues to have 2 power at this point. The blue token had 1 power and now it has 2. Then we're going to put the next phase, which is the blue one. This is currently inactive. It will gain a 3rd power token, and the same thing is going to happen with the yellow one. So it will gain a 3rd power token as well. At this point, we need to pull ourselves a stage card. Let's just choose one at random. And that is going to be Misguided Heroics. And that means they're going to be able to roll 2 dice. Maybe it'll take off some, I don't know, some defense. Maybe it'll get rid of some health. Maybe it will even defeat one of the tokens that's out there. We don't really know what it's going to do because right now it's all theoretical. But if they defeat any of the enemies, they are not in your play area. They're in the stage area. You will not get any loot. So just keep that part in mind. And this is going to bring us to our last example of what to do. Basically, you're at the point where you should be freaking out if you have 3 power on your tokens, especially if it's 3 on both. You're going to need to use that interact and start getting rid of those tokens. So let's take a quick look back at the setup card and see how the interact works. So the interact can be done anywhere. It doesn't require you to be in a specific location unless it tells you, but the effect is only going to happen if you are, in this case, next to, adjacent, an inactive objective. We will have to move Yinghua down in order for her to use it, but Brandon is perfectly placed where he's at. When it comes up to their turns, we will be putting 2 new threat tokens in place as before, but then we can start initiating our strategy. What's that going to be? Well, you're going to flip the tokens over to their other side, and then you gain the power from it. And you flip those power over to gain the defense token on that side. This makes it kind of random. You should theoretically be putting random tokens on their, with the power side onto these characters. I always have my stuff neatly sorted into token trays, and that makes it easier for me to grab. So chances are pretty high you're going to have to either figure out or throw in a bag or whatever the case is, some randomization factor. Otherwise, you're going to be only getting, a very specific defense token based on your habits. So that's something to think about here, but it is useful. In this situation, like I say, move Yinghua down, flip them both using the interacts, and then finish the turn out with your cards. You're going to have some more threat tokens in place, but at least you will have a restarted counter to where you can get at least 2 turns before having to do this again. There is not a lot left here for you to be able to do. You could use calming words to move the blue tokens position closer to the safe spaces, assuming that Anastasia will be able to finish helping you defeat that yellow Djinn and clear the path. And that will be a feint, so this card goes away. Like I said, there are quite a few that are also in the deck. You should pretty quickly be able to draw another one and be able to move again. However, you will start getting swarmed, and you will be bunched up, stuck kind of around the defense tokens, trying to not let them get defeated. If you're fighting against an enemy that does attacks that hit every figure, then this is really bad, because the tokens count as figures, not fighters or enemies, and they'll take damage from like an RPG. So just keep those strategies in mind. Otherwise, they shouldn't get hit too much by the boss, but they will get chased around. Power will get added to them, and you'll have to stick by. You'll need a lot of healing. Luckily for Brandon, he does have that healing. And your best bet still, I think, is trying to get them huddled together as close as possible, so that you can start using your fighter synergies to heal up, take breathers, switch who's going to take damage from the boss, move away from the boss so that you don't get hit by things. It's going to be quite a dance moving around back and forth until you're all powered up and feeling much better. Keeping in mind here that Armed Intruders does not flip you from an active state to an inactive state. It says just place one power, so it doesn't really matter if it's active or inactive. You are going to be placing fear onto any objective that you are engaged with, or that is engaged with an enemy. So what will cause it to flip from active to inactive, considering how inactive is the state that we need it to be in to flip to remove the tokens? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Well, Rising Fear is really the only way that you can flip back to an inactive side. So once they start becoming active, they're no longer just going to automatically gain power fear tokens. They are going to continue to try to run away, and they are not going to be able to run away as fast as the minions and boss will be able to move. So it's really up to you to set kind of a blockade so that the minions and boss have to move in big circles so that they can't end up engaged, so that more power doesn't end up on the active objective tokens. So just defeat as many minions as you can, as quickly as you can once they are in their active state, and try to have them either corralled, like the yellow one, so they can't move, or set up in a way that there's more enemies on one side of the board than the other, and it will push them to run in a direction that is closer to the safe space. So right now, if that blue token were to activate and it's supposed to move 2 away from enemies, it's going to be pushed directly into the safe space. If you can see where the positioning is at right now, the way I have it framed, that it wants to go towards that right side of the board, and the center is where the least amount of enemies will be at it. So we've kind of positioned it so that it will land perfectly right where we want it, where the Subway sandwich is, where the safe room is, where the thing that we need to have it be safe is. So looking one more time at the stage rules, if we were able to, then as the blue card activates, let's bring up the blue card, you will see that its movement will push it 2 spaces and it will land on this safe room spot. And once it enters that spot, according to the stage rules, since it had no fear on it, it will go away, being shuffled back into the deck, but everybody gets some loot, so that part's pretty cool too. That will get you a little bit quicker, a nice clean board, getting rid of some minions, gaining more loot, snowballing into hopefully clearing everybody out so you can recover and get some healing and do whatever else you need to do before you can start attacking the boss. And that's basically the strategy. Don't let these guys get killed and you will win. And do your best to keep the enemies on a side of the board that will push them or push your scared staff towards where you need them to go. All right. that is it for me, and I hope you guys enjoyed and were informed by everything that's here. And if you have any more comments, questions, that kind of thing, or if you have an opinion on what the next stage should be and what questions you have on it, that's what comments are for. And next time I get some time, I'll make another video. You guys have a good one.